Hi, and welcome to Discover Meditation. My name is Alex Schubert. I'm the host of this show. I'm a meditation teacher, a therapist, and practitioner. And this show is just a way of, or my way of introducing you to the practices of mindfulness, meditation, a way to introduce some of these things that you may not have heard of or have heard of, but don't really know much about. My hope is that you'll be able to take a little bit of what we talk about today and practice it in your life so that you can get some of the peace or enjoyment or relaxation that can come from some of these practices. So the best way to learn of any practice is, of course, just to do it. So we will start with a short meditation. And we're going to start this meditation the way we start most meditations, which is by getting in a comfortable position, one that is sustainable throughout this short period. And the key to this position is that you should be able to take nice, deep, even breaths. But there's no need to do anything fancy. You don't have to get in a lotus position or be sitting on the floor. You're welcome to sit in a chair or on your couch or even stand if you feel like you would like to stand in this moment. The only important thing is that you stay with this moment and focus on your breathing. So for this, you're welcome to have your eyes opened or closed. Many people find it easier when they're first beginning to have their eyes closed. But if you decide to have them open, just finding a spot in front of you where you can lightly focus, so slightly unfocused, much like one of those pictures from the 80s, the 90s, the magic eye pictures. And we're just going to start by adjusting our position to be comfortable, to allow for deep breathing. And starting with a nice deep breath. Slowly letting it out. And just allowing your breathing to be normal. There's no need to change your breathing. Just allowing it to happen. Bringing your attention to your breath, the act of breathing. Just seeing if you can bring your focus into this moment. Noticing the gentle rise and fall of your chest. Noticing your mind as it wanders, thoughts as they come and go. Not judging that wandering, but bringing your attention back, gently, without judgment. It may help if you're particularly distracted to just count your breaths. 1 as you breathe in and out, all the way up to 10. Breathing in and out. Bringing yourself into this moment with this breath. Allowing things to be as they are. And if you find any areas of tension, stress, just seeing if you can breathe into those areas. Breathing out tension, stress. Breathing in peace, relaxation. Being patient with yourself if you're having difficulty. And as we come back into this moment, just allowing yourself to hold on to any peace or relaxation you may have cultivated, holding on to feelings of kindness and compassion if you have built those in this short time, remembering that you can go back to those feelings whenever you may need. And so today, I thought we would talk a little more about the different types of meditation there are. Throughout the shows that we have been with together already, we've talked about all sorts of different things. We've talked about loving kindness. We've talked a little bit about Zen and MBSR and all of those different things. We've talked about mindfulness meditation. And today I just thought I would do a little more of a general overview for those of you who either haven't watched the previous shows or want to just spend a little more time trying to understand. Of course, in this day and age, Google or other search engines are a wonderful resource for finding out more information. And this is nothing more than just a cursory look at all of the different types, and we could never in a million years get to them in this short time. And this is just more of maybe a hope of a way to give you a little place to start. So, through my training, I was originally trained in what is known as Zen meditation, also known as Zazen. And that is very similar to what we've been talking about. It's the idea of sitting. It's a seated meditation. This is one of the earlier types of meditation that made its way over from India and then China, jumping over to Japan. So when many people think of meditation, they typically think of Zazen, of Japanese monks sitting in a monastery. And Zen meditation in itself is a little more aesthetic, a little more stripped down of a lot of trappings, a lot of ceremony. It's a lot about the sitting. Of course, this is different depending on which school. As with any type of practice, over the time it has changed some. But in general, it is very much like we've done together with sitting on a mat, a cushion. This is actually a fairly typical Zen. This is a Zafu. And of course, I have the big cushion's a Zabuton, and I believe the Zafu is the smaller cushion I'm sitting on. But again, these are trappings in a way. They don't need to be used. I use them for comfort. You may also be aware of what might be called, or what is called the lotus position, which I could never in a million years demonstrate for you, but the idea of having your feet up in a position that is much like the lotus flower. Yeah, not necessary, and can be very difficult for us Westerners, especially myself, I can speak for. The other way, which I'm not doing today but have in previous shows, is also in more of a kneeling position, which can also be used in Zazen. So the main component of this meditation that I think many people are slightly familiar with is the idea of clearing your mind and just focusing on your breath. So it's a little different than some of the other meditations we might talk about where you're focusing on some sort of contemplative element, such as loving kindness or anything like that. For most beginnings of Zen, it's all about the breath, about focusing on it, and the counting is very frequently used during early forms. There's also the idea of, and forgive my pronunciation, but koans, which most people, again, very familiar with when we talk about Zen. A very famous one would be the sound of one hand clapping, your face before your mother was born. The idea of these are for advanced practitioners to focus on a singular idea which is thought to be unsolvable, no concrete answer. These are generally given by a master to a student, and the student is then supposed to work on that. Again, just another form of contemplation, a way to focus for different sects, but for a majority of them, one of the principal ideas is this concept of enlightenment, this kind of all-knowing, how can you describe enlightenment, right? The idea of sudden understanding, really, through this practice. And much more complex than I'm making it out to be in this very short time, but can be a good starting point for those who maybe already have an interest in Japan through manga or anime or things like that, and might be curious. Also, actually, to be mentioned, very frequently practiced facing a wall. Even with a group, everybody in the group will face the wall through the period of meditation. Again, very stripped down from some of the trappings of some of the other meditations. So, that's one typical meditation. The next one, which in Massachusetts we're fortunate enough to have more access to than some other places, is Vipassana meditation. This is an insight meditation, meaning that it is looking at developing insights within yourself. And I forget exactly where it's located, but in Massachusetts, I believe, in the western part, there is a Vipassana center which one can go for free and be part of a 10-day meditation retreat. Not for somebody who hasn't dipped their toes in meditation yet, but if you've been practicing for a little while and want to up your understanding, it is a resource that is available. It's a little unusual in that you can't get a lot of information about Vipassana until you actually participate in it. There is a very focused curriculum within Vipassana, and again, a name I'm sure I'm horribly pronouncing, but Ganoka was the founder of this movement, and his teachings are what are used within these Vipassana centers. They are very popular. Many people find them to be enormously helpful, though very challenging, I'm sure you can imagine, to do a 10-day retreat. But it is a type of meditation which a lot of what we do and a lot of what I do has a lot of similarities. Again, focusing with the breathing, focusing on insights and thoughts. But I can't give you much more information of that without you actually experiencing it, since I have not been to a retreat myself. So again, another one that's available. If you live in Massachusetts, you're fortunate that there are these resources available. And one of the things that tends to happen with Western meditations, and I consider myself very guilty of this, is that taking a little bit from each one and making it one's own, which I find valuable, to find what works for me, which might be different from what works for you, but having some sort of structure noticing that the breath is always going to be part of whatever it is that you might learn, that focus on the breath is one of the most useful things for us. There are other typical insight style ones. Tibetan Buddhism, which has its own form of meditations, are also widely available in Massachusetts. We actually in Northampton have a large Tibetan community. So for those of you who are interested in some of those more traditional teachings, they are available. Tibetan Buddhism, Tibetan meditations tend to be a little more otherworldly than some of these other ones we're talking about, focusing on some things like hungry ghosts, on kind of spirits that much like in Christianity can affect one's life, and that some of these meditations are working with that. But a little different, and very much on ceremony. A lot of great stuff coming from that, including things like mandalas, which are all the rage now with the idea of therapeutic coloring. Mandalas are these large circles, though now on paper much smaller, intricate, various colors, and it's all about being in the moment and focusing, which can be achieved very much with coloring. In fact, coloring can be a meditative practice. Mindfulness meditation is a lot of what we talk about. It's really my main focus, so most of what I'm bringing to you is really more of a mindfulness meditation where we look at being aware of ourselves, aware of our breathing, aware of our thoughts, all the way down to secondary mindfulness practices that may involve something as simple as being mindful while eating, mindful while walking, mindful while having a conversation. And mindfulness meditation, as I've talked about in the past, is widely integrated with MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, which Jon Kabat-Zinn created at UMass Medical School, and is widely rolling out throughout the world. As I've said, I've had the good fortune of being with at a retreat at a conference with Dr. Kabat-Zinn, and just amazing work he's done with bringing these ideas of mindfulness to the medical community and now the psychological community, including a huge focus on neuropsychology, looking at the brain and the effect these practices are having on the brain. Which, to go back to Tibetan Buddhism, the Dalai Lama is well known for his work with neuroscientists in looking at what happens to the brain of, let's say, Tibetan monks who practice these things from a very young age, and how that changes their brains. And of course, in psychology, a lot of our focus is behavior and all of that stuff, but of course you can't have one without the other, right? These changes in the brain are a huge part of what we're working on, and through something as simple as mindfulness practice, like we did at the beginning of this show, we can make those brain changes for our benefit. So the last one I really want to talk about today is one that for many people in especially this part of the country, it's a little more comfortable, which would be things such as Christian meditations, which actually have a very long history as well. That meditation's not only an Asian Buddhist practice, but has been used by Christians for a very long period of time. In general, one of the things that is different with Christian meditation is that idea of focusing on either maybe a scripture. I once sat with a Christian group, and our meditation was focused around a piece of scripture that we were given at the beginning of the meditation and used as a focal point, and then had the ability to share afterwards. So These are not practices that are only rooted in Buddhism, and I think that's always important to emphasize, because that can be a stumbling block for many people, that regardless of what your beliefs are or lack of beliefs, this is as much secular as it is religious, that you can incorporate these things. And just doing a little bit of research of maybe groups that are around. I was actually a member of a group just recently that, again, this was with a priest and a group of people within a church rectory. So very much using the Christian teachings, but bringing it back to our breath, our focus. This awareness is really what we're shooting for, regardless of how you get there. Awareness of ourselves, of others, of really what we want, which is that freedom of suffering, is really what we're shooting for. Regardless of how we get there, the path leads to kind of the same place. There's some variations, don't get me wrong. So, actually, I wanted to mention one more piece. So the thing that I wanted to mention was a little more, again, stereotypical, the idea of the mantra meditation, which I did forget to mention, the idea of using sound as a type of meditation, a vibration, for many people, the idea of a set phrase, actually pretty similar to things like prayer. The idea of saying something and it reverberating throughout the universe, through the world, to other people. Many people think of this, again, when they think of stereotypical meditation, generally with some kind of hand signals, palms up, where one might say Om. The longer phrase is Om Mani Padme Hum, which is referring to the Lotus Sutra. Not one that I typically practice a lot. It's just not one that speaks to me. But many find that the repetition of this mantra, of any mantra, can bring a sense of connection, of peace. And this would, you may have noticed that I have what are called mala beads that I tend to wear. And much like rosary beads, for those of you who are familiar with that practice, the mantra meditation can be counted off with the mala beads. The idea of saying the mantra and moving from bead to keep count, to keep track. Again, so many different practices, so many different ways of bringing this feeling of contentment, of peace, that has helped so many for so many thousands of years. So, due to our shortness of time, I want to make sure that we do get to a meditation. I would recommend looking into whatever practice sounded the most interesting to you, that it doesn't hurt to try various practices. There is no really wrong way to practice. There are some teachers who you should be wary of, though. I guess that's always a good thing to be aware of. There are some who will use these practices to their own gain, and not always for the benefit of an individual. So, in general, as with anything, if something seems too good to be true, if the person seems too good to be true, if they are giving you promises of, I don't know, something that doesn't seem right, please question it, and Google it, right? Go on the internet, make sure this is legitimate. And in the future, we'll talk a little more about some of these practices that I wasn't able to get to today. So I want to end with another meditation. I want to bring us to a MBSR style meditation, mindfulness-based stress reduction, where we're going to focus on our bodies, and we're going to do a very short version of the body scan. So to do this, you can get in any position you'd like. Many people find it easier to lie down with the body scan, but this is completely up to you, to whatever feels right to you in this moment. So starting with a nice deep breath, slowly letting it out. And letting go of anything we may have been talking about, you may have been thinking about, that you might have been doing during this time. And just bringing yourself back to this moment. Using your breath as an anchor, as a focal point. Breathing in and out. And as we're doing this with short time, it won't be as intricate. But starting at your feet, guiding your breath through your body, down to the tips of your toes, and just noticing whatever there is to notice. No need to change anything, to adjust. Just noticing what there is. Or even noticing maybe that you don't notice anything, that there are no sensations. Allowing your feet and toes to relax. Moving into your calves, your knees. Briefly touching with awareness. Allowing those areas to relax. And moving up to your thighs, your hips, all of your lower body. Being aware of whatever is there to experience. And if you find any areas of discomfort or tension, just breathing into those areas. Breathing out any of that tension or discomfort. Moving our attention to our abdomen, our lower back. Just being aware. Now our upper back, neck and shoulders. Our arms, upper arms, forearms. And if you'd like, even wiggling your fingers, allowing them to loosen, noticing what that might feel like. Bringing that attention, our face, head. Noticing any tension we may be holding in that area, any tightness in our jaw, just allowing it to loosen. And becoming aware of our whole body, from head to toe. Taking another moment to scan through, noticing areas of tightness or tension, allowing them to relax. And now, just coming back into this room, to this moment. And although this was a short time, seeing if you can hold on to any of that comfort or relaxation or peace you may have brought to yourself, remembering that you can always go back to it at any time. And I want to thank you for joining me today. And I hope that you'll come back again so that we can spend more time just enjoying these moments together, bringing peace and calmness. Thank you and good night.